Should we be concerned about the Buffalo Bills salary cap situation? We're going to break that down and a whole lot more today on Locked On Bills.
You are Locked On Bills, your daily Buffalo Bills podcast. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
What's up, Bills Mafia? It's Joe Marino, author of the Herd Mentality Substack, co-host of the Locked On NFL Scouting Podcast, co-host of the NFL First Read Podcast, and I am your host of Locked On Bills. Want to thank you for making Locked On Bills your first listen every day, and a big welcome and shout out to our everydayers. You know who you are. Those of you who never miss a single episode, I appreciate y'all being here very, very much. I'd also like to invite you to subscribe or follow for free on YouTube or wherever you listen to podcasts. We're part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. Today's episode is brought to you by FanDuel. Football season is around the corner. Visit the FanDuel app today and start planning your futures bets now. Well, folks, welcome in. Time for Herd Mentality, the weekly episode where you control our discussion. Have some great things to get into today, including some great questions about the safety position, Michael Hoecht, the Bills' run scheme, the future at center. But we start with a good question about the Bills' salary cap position. This comes from Tequila Soda, who says, "Hey, Joe, I saw a chart the other day that indicates the Bills have the lowest amount of cap space of any team. This is worrisome for many reasons. Could you talk about how the Bills got to this point and what this says about Brandon Beane as a general manager and what this could mean for the Bills moving forward?" So the Bills have a little over $1 million in cap space. The Raiders are the only team with less. Your question is, what does it say? It says that Brandon Beane is maximizing spending. They have pushed the limits of the salary cap every year to try to put the best team they can on the field. They've manipulated the cap for years by expensing things down the line to get things right now. For example, what they're doing with Larry Ogunjobi. They're paying him $4 million this year. They're also paying him $4 million next year, whether he's on the team or not. You've restructured contracts to create cap space, which means you push future salary down the line in terms of how it's expensed against the cap. It means that Brandon Beane is aware of the win now window that the Bills are in, and they're not leaving cap space unused. That's what it means. Now, they're going to need some cap space to operate this season. They have two notable opportunities to create cap space. One that I kind of expect to happen, which is restructuring Dion Dawkins, which would free up $9.8 million in cap space. They could restructure Dawson Knox for $6.3 million in cap space. There's trade opportunities with AJ Epinesa and Curtis Samuel. I think you're going to see some of that come together, so the Bills will have a little bit more cushion to work throughout the season, but there's no alarm bells that need to go off. It's a team that has a chance to go win a Super Bowl, and the general manager is maximizing the spending. You wouldn't like it if the Bills had $30 million in cap space, would you? You'd want him to spend it on players. Well, he has. Koala Bear Khan says this: "It's obvious the new core for the Bills is set for the next 4 to 5 years with the extensions Beane has given out to his drafted players. However, does this mean we will see a little less multi-year contracts given out to free agents for future offseasons? The past few years, Curtis Samuel, Josh Palmer, Michael Hoecht, Connor McGovern, etc., have been signed for multiple seasons. But do you see Beane leaning a little more towards keeping his drafted players, even if they cost more compared to what could be available in free agency?" Well, I think that's always going to be the case. I think Beane is always going to prioritize his own players over outside free agents, and I think every general manager should have that approach. But the cap's going to keep going up, folks. The ESPN deal with the NFL is going to be huge, and that puts more revenue into the league. And the salary cap is a percentage of the NFL's revenue that, as the league continues to take in more money, the size of the amount of the cut that goes to the players continues to go up. So that's a good part of this. And also, by having all of these extensions done, it creates for more opportunities to restructure those deals to create cap space, just like the Bills have throughout the last several years. So again, I think the Bills will always prefer to prioritize in-house extensions as long as the dollar amounts make sense. And I think with a guy like Gabe Davis or a guy like Tremaine Edmonds, those price points got too high. And the Bills weren't comfortable with where those opportunities were for other teams. They said, go ahead, take that. We're not going to pay that. So I think as long as the dollar amount makes sense for the Bills, they're going to handle those in-house extensions. The thing about multi-year deals on the free agent market is it gives you better chances to structure the deal to fit your current cap situation. So you're always going to have several one-year deals that you're going to work with on a year-to-year basis. But if you feel good about a guy like the Bills did with McGovern or Hoecht, you mentioned Josh Palmer, Curtis Samuel, you can make those deals 2-3 years and give yourself more wiggle room in terms of flexibility to structure the deal and make it work for your current cap situation. But I think at the core of the last two questions, the cap's going to keep going up as the league continues to draw more and more revenue. James says, do you think that preseason injuries to Cedric Van Pran-Granger and Alec Anderson change the calculus on a potential Connor McGovern extension? So this is definitely a really good question and a good storyline that probably not getting discussed enough. You look at Connor McGovern in the last year of his deal, and you look at some of the depth options that have been developing, and you think maybe there's a succession plan in place, whether that's Cedric Van Pran-Granger, whether that's Alec Anderson. And the fact that both of those guys have, basically missed, Cedric's missed all of camp and Anderson's missed a good chunk of it, although he's back and practicing. It's not been a helpful camp in gaining a better understanding of where those players are at and projecting them as starters. It's a major bummer. And Tylen Grable's missed a good amount of time as well with the concussion. So while you'd love to be able to look at those internal candidates and have a very good understanding of where their arc is headed, I think the key to a Connor McGovern extension is going to be his priorities. If he's out to get every dollar he can, which he might be, I think he'll get more from another team. I think if Connor McGovern says, you know what, I want to test the free agent market and see what's out there for me, I think he'll get more than what Buffalo can give him. But he doesn't get Buffalo. He doesn't get Josh Allen. He doesn't get the pizza party thing. You saw the clip in Hard Knocks when his wife's like, these guys just got home from camp. They've been gone for like 2.5 weeks. And Josh Allen sends out a note to, the group text and says, who wants to come over and watch a movie? What's important to Connor? Is he going to be willing to take $2 or $3 million less a year to stay in Buffalo and have that? Or does he want every dollar he can get? It comes down to his priorities. And whatever is most important to him is what he needs to do. But I think that's what it's going to come down to. And then secondary to that is, all right, what do you think about Van Pran-Granger and Anderson as succession plans? I think the Bills would love to continue with Connor McGovern. I think they would. It's what are Connor's priorities? And I guess you could put that back on the Bills and say, how much are the Bills willing to spend to keep Connor McGovern? So, it's in the Bills' court as well. They could meet his demands and get the deal done, but it comes down to everyone's priorities and how they align and where those negotiations go. But it certainly has not been a helpful summer to learn more about those two players in particular as potential succession plans. All right, coming up next, have a good question about which former player I'd like to add to this team, but there's a really cool caveat because I always say Bruce Smith. The answer is always Bruce Smith, but there's a caveat this time. We'll break that down here next. Folks, be sure to stick with me. August 26th is officially FanDuel Futures Day, a brand new holiday for football fans who live for bold predictions and preseason hunches. For just 24 hours, FanDuel is giving you deals on NFL season predictions. So whether you're calling your MVP, eyeing a long shot division winner, or ready to crown your Super Bowl champion before week 1 even kicks off, this is your moment. So take a flyer on the MVP race. You think Josh Allen goes back-to-back? Does Lamar get it for a third time? Or is there a dark horse candidate you like? Jared Goff, maybe. Baker Mayfield. You can crown your Super Bowl pick. Do you think the Bills do it this year? Do their Eagles repeat? Is it the Chiefs again? Or you can parlay your division winner dark horses and really give yourself some spicy odds. So visit the FanDuel app today and start planning your futures bets now, because Futures Day is one day and one day only. FanDuel, play your game. All right, folks, welcome back. Here's the question. B. Smith says, we always ask which former player you'd want to add to this team, but that gets boring because the answer is always Bruce Smith. So which under-the-radar player would you add to this team? My definition of under the radar is they never made a Pro Bowl with the Bills, but you can define it differently if you want. I think that's a good way to define it. I really do. And I get this question all the time, and I always say Bruce Smith. I always. And now you've made that not possible for me. So the former player that never made a Pro Bowl with the Bills that I would add to this team is Lee Evans. And now, listen, I want to hear from you. If you hear that question, tell me who your pick would be in the YouTube comments. But I'm going with Lee Evans. Again, when you take away that they can't make a Pro Bowl, that's going to reduce your player pool that you can pick from, because I'd pick some crazy good defensive lineman. Well, if they were a crazy good defensive lineman, they probably made the Pro Bowl. I thought about some of the corners. I even thought about Terrence McGee. The problem is Terrence McGee, he made a Pro Bowl. Terrence McGee would be a great choice. You get a corner and you get a good kick and punt returner, but he made a Pro Bowl, so it doesn't work. So Lee Evans is the player that I think would bring something to this team that I'm not sure they have, which is that level of down the field receiving skill, a true field stretcher, a guy that can add a big time explosive element to this passing game. I'm excited about Josh Palmer. I really am. But he's not Lee Evans. Lee Evans, for a stretch, was one of the most dynamic deep threats in the NFL. So that would be the piece that I'd add to this roster. Again, let me know who you would pick in the YouTube comments. Hiding says, we understand that James Cook is a zone runner, whereas Ray Davis is a gap runner. Are there certain looks or game plans that an offensive coordinator comes up with that would prioritize zone over gap running or vice versa? Do you know if Cromer historically favors one style of run scheme versus another? Finally, from a skills and body type perspective, does the Bills' offensive line personnel group tend favorably to one style of run scheme versus another? Fun question here. I'll say this. Generally, NFL teams run a good amount of zone and gap runs. There's very few teams that are significantly skewed one or the other. You look at teams like Atlanta, Pittsburgh, they are your heavy zone teams. Most teams are pretty even and balanced. The Bills last year ran zone 41% of run plays. In 2023, they ran 30% zone, which was dead last. So you've seen an 11% jump in zone runs year over year, and I think that went hand in hand with how good James Cook was last season. Aaron Cromer has always been involved with different run schemes. I don't think that there's one that he does better than others. We've seen him be highly successful with both. When I look at the Bills' offensive line in terms of the personnel they have and how it fits either a zone or a gap scheme, these are all big and athletic dudes. So they would really fit either. I think they have very versatile offensive linemen in terms of what schemes they can run. Osiris Torrance would be the one player you'd look at in the group and say, that guy fits a gap scheme better. But I think the other four starters, very interchangeable. And I think when you have the interchangeability of those other four, you can probably insert a one that doesn't quite fit exactly the zone scheme better, right? I think that makes it more digestible. In terms of when a coordinator would want to use a particular style of run versus another, I think it can be game plan specific depending on the defensive personnel. If you're going up against a defensive line and a defensive front that is more athletic, that is smaller, you probably want to run a lot of gap schemes, right? Because they're not going to be as big, and you can get downhill at them, get displacement, move bodies vertically, and create running lanes. If they're a bigger and less athletic front, then you want to run zone and really stress their ability to work laterally and pursue the football. So I think that's where you would lean into one scheme versus another. But the Bills are very multiple with their run scheme. Again, James Cook is a better zone runner, and Ray Davis is a better gap runner. But certainly James Cook has had a lot of success with gap runs. And with Ray Davis, I think you could look at his college career, and it definitely tells a story that his efficiency in gap runs is better than zone. But I also feel like as he continues to gain time in this system with the same blocking scheme, that's going to unlock more of his ability in zone. Because if you look, I mean, even in college, he played for like 3 different teams. And I think the zone element, there's more of a timing and a feel and an understanding of how your offensive line is going to block certain fronts, whereas gap schemes are like very much defined tracks of where you're supposed to go with the ball. So point being is that as Ray gets more time in this scheme with these blockers, I think it will allow him to be a more effective zone runner. Kenny says, what's your ideal traits for an NFL backup quarterback? And there's a second part is if you could have any current NFL backup quarterback as the Bills backup quarterback, who would it be and why? So this is my own personal ideology, and I don't think the Bills necessarily agree with me. I would want in my backup quarterback some sort of physical upside where I get movement skills and I get arm talent. Because if your backup quarterback goes in, they're never going to be repped appropriately for the job. So asking them to play with consistent timing, to be consistent in terms of working progressions, they're just not going to be up to speed. So give me someone who can invoke some chaos that has the ability to be creative and make a play outside of structure. Because, again, they're just not going to be repped enough to go in there and hit their back foot and throw the football on time. It's just not going to happen. They don't have the reps. So I want that physical upside where, okay, maybe I had a bad turn down. Maybe I didn't read this progression clean, but at least I can run outside the pocket and throw a football down the field, right? Do something. Throw up a ball to a receiver and draw a pass interference, but I got to have the movement skills and the arm talent to get in there. I want that. In terms of who I would want it to be, and if I could pick any backup quarterback in the league right now, I'd pick Tyson Bagent of the Bears. And that's not just because of what he did to the Bills this past week. I've been a fan of Tyson Bagent going back to when he was at the Senior Bowl. And then you're like, I'm going to the Senior Bowl. I study these players. I'm watching Shepherd. It's Division II team in out of West Virginia, and fell in love with the skill set. Got a chance to meet him. Thought he was an awesome dude. And, he's got good size. He's strong. He can, drive the ball down the field. He can run. That's what I'd want. I'd want somebody that can do that kind of stuff, even if he's not going to be the most consistent in rhythm player. Another guy that I would really like is Malik Willis, where arm talent, movement skills. You see what I mean? I don't want Mike White. That's what I'm telling you. I don't want Matt Barkley. I don't want Case Keenum. I need somebody who can dial it up and make a play because they have physical upside, because they're not going to be able to come in and run with precision. You need a little something else in the bag. So give me Tyson Bagent, Malik Willis, guys with some physical upside. All right, coming up next, good question about Michael Hoecht, and we'll revisit the kind of the hot button safety conversations here through some different lenses. So folks, be sure to stick with me. Most people can't name all their financial accounts or even what they're worth, whether it's 401ks, properties, or investments. And when you don't have the full picture, you can end up leaving money on the table. That's why there is Monarch Money. It's an all-in-one personal finance tool that brings your entire financial life together in one clean, easy-to-use interface on your laptop or your phone. Monarch does all the heavy lifting for you. You can link all your accounts in minutes, see clear data visuals, and get smart categorization of your spending, and finally feel in control of your money without ever touching a spreadsheet. You have some subscriptions that you forgot you're paying for? Well, I linked all my accounts to Monarch, and I immediately spotted several subscriptions I wasn't even using, and canceling those alone saved me money every month. So don't let financial opportunities slip through the cracks. Use code LOCKEDONNFL at monarchmoney.com in your browser for half off your first year. That's 50% off your first year at monarchmoney.com with code LOCKEDONNFL. All right, folks, welcome back. Got a few more to get to today. The next one comes from Marino, who says, I keep hearing you say that Michael Hoecht has a unique skill set. Can you elaborate on that? Can we do a quick deep dive on what combination of traits, reps at certain positions, or specific skills he has that makes up this uniqueness? Let's talk about it. So this is a guy who in college played interior defensive line, came to the NFL, has played off-ball linebacker, and has played a traditional edge role. So that's a lot right there in terms of where he can work in a defensive front seven. So he can do a lot of different things. You know, you want him to play the run, we can have him play the run as an edge setter. We can have him as a gap shooter. We can have him as a stack linebacker reading his keys and playing downhill. As a pass rusher, he can rush from a variety of alignments. You can have him rush interior gaps and reduce inside. He can blitz from depth. He can do a traditional edge rush. That's a lot of different things that you can use him. And you can have him do some coverage drops. I'd have it, shallow zones, but there's just a lot that he can bring to your team. Think Lorenzo Alexander here. It's the closest thing that we've seen to that. Actually, a pretty similar skill set and how that can be deployed. My favorite thing about what I believe Michael Hoecht can bring to this team is the Bills can be kind of in a 4-3, but it's really a quasi 4-3 that's a five-man front because you're going to have your four traditional down linemen. Then you can bring Michael Hoecht in as a Sam linebacker, walk him down on the line of scrimmage, play him over tight ends. And it's sort of a base 4-3, but really it's a five-man front. I'd love that. You can do that against certain personnel groupings. And something that's really challenged the Bills has been one team's go bigger personnel, and they have these big tight ends, or they play an extra offensive lineman on the edge, and it really stresses the Bills and structurally how they play defense. Now you have what I think is a nice counterpunch in Michael Hoecht with the alignment versatility that he brings that can be this hybrid edge player that's also capable of being a stack backer. So I think he unlocks a ton for this front. I really do. He's just a good player. I mean, he's been my favorite part of this preseason probably so far. It's been Tyrell Shavers and Michael Hoecht as the two guys that, if they're on the field, I'm watching them. And Hoyt's a very skilled player. He's very, very athletic. And he's a relentless player, too. I mean, the competitive temperament that he plays with, I mean, I love it. So excited to see what he brings. And hopefully that answer paints a good picture for how he can matter in this scheme. The next one comes from someone in our subtext community. When you sign up for the subtext, you can choose to put your name or not. They didn't, so we'll just call it subtext subscriber. Subtext subscriber says, most, if not all, scouting reports for Cole Bishop leading up to the draft said he was best suited as a strong safety. Playing close to the line of scrimmage seems to be a strength. Conversely, a free safety typically has deep coverage responsibility, which is not what Cole is known for. Any concerns, forcing him to play free safety could move him after Rapp leaves, but feels like a square peg in a round hole. The Bills want their safeties to be interchangeable. They don't have a defined free safety or a defined strong safety. Rapp is the better deep zone defender, but he also has less range than Cole Bishop. Both are effective as low alignment players. I don't think they complement each other well, but the Bills have a different vision for me than me for this position group. I would want more complementary players. I'd want guys that are truly versatile, and I don't feel that way. So I'm curious to see how it comes together, but I don't think the Bills really have a traditional free safety versus a traditional strong safety. I think they're going to want to use them to their strengths as best they can, but they're both going to have to play both roles. We'll see how it goes. Greg says, wanted to ask a question about adding another safety. It seems to be a lot of questions about the development of Cole Bishop and being one snap away from Damar Hamlin being our starting safety, who you have repeatedly stressed was a late day 3 pick and was never meant to be a long-term option at safety for the Bills. It was 2 years ago that the Bills traded for Rasul Douglas. Do you foresee them doing something similar or maybe signing free agent Justin Simmons? If so, what good options do you think could become available, if any? If not, why not? I think the Bills are going to see this through with Cole Bishop. I do. And we kind of talked about this yesterday, but the messaging is very similar to where it was with Terrell Bernard at this exact point. And the parallels are pretty undeniable. Shaky rookie season, opportunity to step into a starting role in year 2, injured for camp, injured right up until, you're on the doorstep of the season. Sean McDermott publicly calls him out, and Terrell Bernard's awesome. Hopefully the same can be true for Cole Bishop. I think they're going to see it through. I am not expecting a major outside addition. I know the hot name is Justin Simmons. I'd have a level of interest there, but is that really going to work? He signed a 1-year, $7.5 million deal with Atlanta last year that was fully guaranteed. I'd assume he'd be looking for something similar to that. When I look at trade deadline deals over the past 10 years involving safeties, you've had 4. Kevin Byard to Philadelphia in 2023. Dean Marlowe to the Bills in 2022. Quandre Diggs to Seattle in 2019. Clinton Dix to Washington in 2018. That's it. Those are your 4 deadline deals for safeties over the last 10 years. It's possible. I think it's such an important part of this defense in terms of communication and then being able to play off of each other that I think the Bills would rather roll with Bishop or Hamlin or Lewis or Forrest or Hancock as players that have been around for the last several months, as opposed to, even if it's a experienced veteran, to bring them in and say, go do all these things immediately that we've been training other people to do for months and in some cases years. So predictively, I don't think that will happen. I'd be interested, but predictively, again, I'm not expecting a major outside move. I think they're going to see it through with Cole Bishop. And if not, just keep going down the ladder. But I think they're going to give Cole Bishop a real opportunity here. And I feel like the messaging has been very intentional. I wish the tape was better. I do. I think it's close. He's just under-repped, right? I mean, fingers crossed here. It's a big investment that the Bills made in this player at a position that they have had a lot of success with. Sean McDermott's had a lot of success with. So I think it's going to play out, and let's hope it plays out well. All right, folks, that's going to do it for us here today on the podcast. We've got Bills Squad later on Thursday dropping. The Bills play Saturday night against the Tampa Bay Buccaneers, so a lot to do. Then it's going to be final cuts, and then the season. So a ton happening, and a ton happening very quickly here as this season is approaching. So make sure that you're subscribed and don't miss anything. I'd love it if you took a second to rate, review, and share the podcast. Have a great rest of your day. Go Bills, and I look forward to catching up with you again real soon.